He drew cars before he could read. While other kids were playing outside, he was filling notebook after notebook with designs that didn't exist yet. Vehicles nobody had built, shapes nobody had imagined. By the time he was old enough to actually touch a car, he already had a decade's worth of blueprints living in his head. That kid grew up to become Dave Kindig, and what he did next didn't just build a business, it rewrote how an entire industry thinks about what a custom car is supposed to be. Most people who end up in the custom car world get there through a garage, a father's project, a beat-up first car they couldn't afford to fix properly, so they figured it out themselves. Dave Kindig got there through a sketchpad. Growing up in Salt Lake City, Utah, Kindig wasn't chasing speed or horsepower the way most car-obsessed kids were. He was chasing proportion, line, form. He wanted to understand why certain cars looked right and others didn't. What made a fender flare feel aggressive rather than awkward? What made a roofline feel fast even when the car was standing still? These are design questions, not mechanical ones. And for a kid in Utah in the 1970s and 80s, asking those questions didn't have an obvious career attached to them. He eventually pursued formal training in art and design, attending the Utah College of Applied Technology. From there, he moved into the automotive world through dealerships, learning the business side while keeping his design obsession alive on the side. In 1999, he launched Kindig-It Design out of Salt Lake City with a clear vision: build cars the way a fine artist would approach a canvas. Every client vehicle would start with a hand-drawn sketch, no exceptions. The fabrication only started after the design was right on paper. That sounds obvious. In the custom car world of 1999, it was almost radical. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. No, the custom car industry in the late 1990s and early 2000s was dominated by two camps. On one side, you had the traditional hot rod world, raw, mechanical, loud, and defined by speed above all else. On the other, you had the restoration crowd, purists who believed a 1969 Camaro should look exactly as it did the day it rolled off the line, original parts wherever possible. Kindig didn't fit either world. What he was building fell into a category that barely had a name yet: restomods, classic car bodies, reimagined with modern proportions, modern interiors, and modern performance underneath. A 1957 Chevy Bel Air with a fuel-injected engine, a custom-fabricated interior, and bodywork so clean it looked like it came from a factory that never actually existed. The outside felt nostalgic. Everything else was better than new. The builds coming out of Kindig-It Design started appearing at the SEMA show in Las Vegas, the automotive industry's most prestigious annual event, where the best custom builders in the country compete for recognition from peers and manufacturers alike. Kindig-It didn't just show up, they started winning. Multiple builds took home top honors in their categories, and the cars drew crowds that had nothing to do with their engine specs. People were stopping because the cars were beautiful, because they looked like someone had actually thought about them. That distinction, aesthetic intentionality in a field that had long prioritized mechanical performance over visual refinement, is what began to separate Kindig from the rest of the industry. But here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. SEMA wins build a reputation within the industry. Television builds a reputation everywhere else. In 2014, the Velocity channel premiered Bitchin' Rides, a documentary-style series following Dave Kindig and his team at Kindig-It Design through the process of building high-end custom cars from concept to completion. The show did something most automotive television hadn't done before. It treated the design process as the story, not just the transformation reveal, not just the dyno numbers, the actual thinking behind every decision. Why this wheel? Why this stance? Why this paint? Was laid out for an audience that had never seen inside that process before. The show ran multiple seasons and drew an audience well beyond the existing car community. People who had never attended a car show, never watched a drag race, never thought much about what a custom build even meant, were suddenly invested in whether a particular fender modification was going to work. Because Kindig explained it in terms anyone could understand. He talked about cars the way a designer talks about architecture, as problem-solving that is also, at the same time, art. The ripple effect wasn't subtle. Inquiries to Kindig-It Design increased dramatically after the show's debut. More significantly, interest in the restomod category as a whole expanded across the industry. Builders who had been working in the space for years reported new clients coming in having watched Bitchin' Rides and now knowing what they wanted for the first time. What happened next is the reason this story spread across the internet. Here is what most coverage of Dave Kindig misses. The conversation tends to focus on the cars themselves, the winning builds, the television fame, the Salt Lake City shop that became a destination. What gets less attention is what happened to the broader market around him. Before the Restomod category had mainstream visibility, the premium custom car space was tightly defined. You paid for performance, or you paid for historical accuracy. The idea that someone would commission a six-figure build specifically because of how it looked, because an artist had designed it from the ground up to be visually cohesive in a way factory cars never are, was a niche within a niche. After Bitchin' Rides ran for several seasons, that calculation changed. A new category of buyer entered the market: collectors and enthusiasts who approached custom cars the way they approached fine art or architecture, as objects with design value independent of their mechanical specifications. That buyer existed before Dave Kindig, but Kindig-It design gave that buyer a language and a reference point. He made the Restomod Premium legitimate as a category in a way it hadn't quite been before. Other builders began incorporating more formal design processes into their work. The hand sketch phase, Kindig's signature step before any fabrication begins, became something other shops started referencing as a best practice. The SEMA show began seeing more builds that prioritized visual cohesion over raw performance metrics. The judging criteria themselves shifted over time to accommodate aesthetic design as a standalone value. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. There is something about Dave Kindig's career that rarely comes up when people discuss his influence on the custom car world. His background is not in fabrication. He is not, at his core, a mechanic or a metal worker in the traditional sense. He is a fine artist who found a medium. That distinction matters more than it might seem. Most custom shops are built around a master fabricator, someone whose primary language is the metal itself, who develops the design instinctively through the build process. Kindig inverted that model. The design comes first, fully realized on paper, and the fabrication is the execution of a pre-existing vision. This is how product design works. It is how architecture works. It is not traditionally how car building works. What this produced, and what makes Kindig-It design's output visually distinct, even among other high-end shops, is an internal consistency that doesn't happen by accident. When you look at a Kindig build, every element relates to every other element in a way that suggests someone thought about the whole before making any of the parts. The wheel choice informs the stance, which informs the body modifications, which inform the interior. It coheres because it was designed to cohere, not assembled from good individual decisions. That methodology, more than the television fame or the SEMA wins, is what changed how the industry thinks. The result didn't just produce better-looking cars. It produced a different argument for what custom car building could be. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Kindig-It design is still operating out of Salt Lake City as of 2025. The waitlist for a custom build reportedly extends several years, a position that reflects both the demand the television exposure created and the deliberate decision to keep the shop at a size where Kindig himself remains hands-on with the design process for every vehicle. Dave Kindig has continued to appear at car shows and industry events, including regular presence at SEMA, where Kindig-It builds remain a consistent draw. His wife Charity continues as co-owner, managing the business side of an operation that has grown well beyond the one-man design studio it started as in 1999. There is no announced new television project as of mid-2025. Whether Bitchin' Rides returns in some form, or whether a different project emerges, remains an open question. What is clear is that Kindig has built something that doesn't require television to sustain itself. The reputation and the waitlist exist independent of any screen. For a builder who got his start filling notebooks with cars that didn't exist yet, that kind of institutional permanence is its own statement. What Dave Kindig actually changed wasn't a car, it was the argument. He proved that in a field defined by horsepower and history, the question of how something looks, really looks, with intention and design behind it, was worth treating as seriously as any other specification. Kindig-It design continues to take on new projects, with each build still beginning the same way the first one did. A hand-drawn sketch, a conversation about what the finished car should feel like before a single piece of metal moves. Whatever comes next for him, television, industry consulting, the next SEMA appearance, the methodology travels with him. So here's the question worth asking. Do you think the custom car industry would have arrived at the Restomod market on its own eventually? Or did it take someone like Dave Kindig to force the conversation? Let me know below.